Well, thank you very much, Tanush, for discussing with me about this book and the International Center for inviting, following an idea of our very highly respected honorary consul of Spain in Bangalore, Surbi, who we were discussing on this in Delhi, and he said to me, why don't you come to my city and you introduce the book to more people and they can have a better opinion of how world is changing and our era is changing. Well, this book has a title, is Momentum, and momentum means that we are in a very special moment of our history, that it's going to be in a peak point if we know how to take advantage of that. But the subtitle is very important, that it says on the threshold of the new world. It doesn't say the arriving of the new world. It's on the threshold. So it means that we have a step in. It's not a question that it will come automatically. It's a question that is depending on us. So the main thing that is this about, I was in the lockdown in my house in Spain, and suddenly my daughter came to see me, and quite sad, he said to me, you know, Daddy, the previous generation to mine, only 10 years before, in that he was referring to, had a lot of, was very well prepared, had a lot of opportunities. Then it came the crisis of Lehman Brothers, and it affected very in depth the European economy, and they had 10 very difficult years. So now everything was going to take off, and suddenly it comes this pandemic, and it's going to ruin our future. So I said, well, I have to write a book, especially for the new generation, to show how great opportunities they are going to have, and at the same time, how fragile is the world that is not only dependent on the private sector and innovations, but also in which global framework, political framework we have to make this a very safe world. So, in fact, this is a book that has like two faces, as we have in planet Earth. We have the day and the night. This book has like two faces. One is connected with all the innovations that will arrive very soon to humanity, and how this is going to change all the way of behaving, of producing everything, but at the same time, how we have to go one step further and organize in even a more perfect way the political world in order to be safe. The key thing is that we have to think that the central of gravity has to be the individual. It has not to be the nations. The nations are a very positive intermediate element in our history. Is, as I said sometimes, is like the water. The important thing are the oceans. That is where you have the water. But obviously, when it rains, it has to be well organized how the water goes into the oceans, and it goes through the rivers. So the rivers channelize the water into the great oceans, but the key thing are the oceans. And at the end, all the oceans are interconnected, because the Atlantic with the Indic, with the Pacific and the Mediterranean, they have points of connections. So there is only one great ocean in planet Earth, in fact. And the rivers are very important, but are the connectors with the oceans. So the same thing with the nations. We come from very elemental stage, tribes, then villages, then cities, then states, then confederations, then federal states, and the next step is this one. And this is what talks the book in the last chapter. So to make the thing a little bit more understandable, the first idea that exists in the book is that we have a very short time, or initially we have a short time for each one living in this planet. And it is so immense, there are so many opportunities that we will live now in another world with new connections, that people cannot come to this planet and abandon the planet having visited maybe only 0.2% of the planet. There cannot be such a incredible treasures, not only of nature, but of creativity of human beings, and we ignore that. Sometimes, you know, I said that a country that impressed me very much was Egypt. And Egypt, it has 4,000 years. I say that to put another country than India. Another foreign country, very impressive, is Egypt. And it's incredible when I see, for example, a very rich businessman with a lot of possibilities, maybe already 60 years old, and I said to him or her, have you visited Egypt? And he or she says, no, I have not gone there. So, you know, it's incredible. So for the new generation, there is a message in this book saying, listen, take advantage of your time and discover the richness of the life circle that you have coming. Then the second thing is the new opportunities that will be in this planet through artificial intelligence. Because obviously, for example, one is how the world is going to change in mobility. People, when I spoke in the chapter about the aerial mobility, people sometimes say, well, this is a very wishful thinking. But I say, you know, what has happened with mobility with the cars? In 1900, there were nearly no cars in the planet, and there were no roads paved, 1900. Today, 120 years later, there are 2.5 billion cars moving at the same time in planet Earth. There are millions and millions of roads, motorways paved, kilometers paved, and we have made an incredible effort. Making tunnel and bridges is enormous, the effort, but at the same time is a very deep injury on the planet, because every time you make a motorway, maybe you cannot cross from one place to the other in 30 or 40 kilometers. So you have divided animals, you have divided normal communication of people, etc. But it has been a great breakthrough. So if you consider that it is said that human beings have been here for more than 119,000 years, the very origin, and that in the last 120 years we have passed from not having mobility nearly, we have gone to total mobility by land, you can see that the next mobility will be the aerial mobility. And the aerial mobility, the nature, has already shown us that it's very safe. Because when you see the starlings birds that manage to fly 5 billion at the same time, playing in the sky with no single crash, with no accident, nature has already shown us that there is an algorithm that makes this possible. So when this will happen, this will be such an important transformation as it has happened with the mobile telephones, you know. Now everybody is connected, and those who were very at the back, some countries that had not even connection between cities, and obviously all the country was unconnected. Now through the mobile telephones and the satellites, they have gone immediately to the connection. So the great future of mobility for humanity would be aerial mobility. But these, at the same time, will transform urbanization. It will transform where we do the houses, how we establish in planet Earth. It will be a massive transformation. We have to understand that only 6% of the surface of the planet is occupied at this moment, because there are some places like big deserts or big areas of mountains that are too difficult to create a road, or it's too expensive, etc. All this will change with aerial communication. So this is shown in the book, and at the same time the book shows how it will change financing, how it will change education, how it will change justice. Everything is going to change through the entry in a new era of the intelligence. As I was saying one day, nature has shown to us in a very simple way how important is each individual by giving a unique characteristic. It is shown in our skin through the fingerprint. We have at this moment 8 billion of different fingerprints that these allow us to have security in the passport controls, etc. But imagine this is just 1 centimeter of skin, is nothing. So imagine what is the connection of our neurons. That is incredible rich. So it's a pity to use humanity in terms of mass. So the great change, and it goes for education, is to discover what is the unique characteristic of each individual and to see how each individual is going to be really creative for the whole of humanity. And this is the big transformation in education. One can think that it's very much a dream, but not. We have made a great progress in education. We had very huge masses of illiterated people. Now we have nearly everybody who can read and who can, who can write. The next step, and this has been also very helpful with the new means of communications, is to go next step is to discover the individual capacity of each one and how we get the maximum advantage for him and for humanity of each individuality. So all this is shown in the book. And then we go to the political area. In the political area, the pandemic show us that the real identity of the people is to be humans. Because it doesn't matter if they were living in Indonesia, in Ghana, in Spain, in France, in the United States, or in Mexico, the arrival of the virus was affecting all of them. So the key thing is how we create a world for the humans. And the text opens with a speech of the Secretary General saying to the nations that we have to move from what we call the United Nations to the United Humanity Organization. We are not so far away from that, because if you think that humanity had never a global political organization until 1930 with the League of Nations, we have made a great breakthrough. We have created first global political organization that could not fly very long, only a few years, unfortunately, because of the terrible Nazi project. But then we went to the second essay, that is United Nations. And United Nations is much better organized, and it has been working for more than 75 years, integrated every time more nations. It started with less than 50, and there are now 198. But if you think that you have this enormous world of 1 billion people organized only with 198 players, is already a great asset. So the book says that the key thing is how we organize the things. For example, a good example is the American Constitution. It's a constitution that you create only for 3 million people in a small part of the country, in a moment that agriculture is the way of living. This set of rules, although amended sometimes by the Supreme Court, have been able to integrate the game of a nation that has gone from 3 million to 330, from a small territory in the East Coast to the total extreme of the West Coast, from a very elemental society of agriculture people to people in industry, people in services, people in financing, people in the digital area. And from a very compact group, Anglo-Saxon group, it has integrated now every group in the world. So it's a mini world in a world. So this is possible. And then you have two nations of very vast dimension, like India and China, 1.4 billion people, more or less, each one. So why is it going to be so difficult to go to the next step, to go to 8 billion people? So we have to put the aim, but the key thing will be to make the new generation the driving force to progress in that direction. So more or less, this is the book. This is a book that wants to say to human beings that our possibilities are immense, that we have to concentrate in taking advantage individually of this great present, this great gift of being here, but at the same time to be able to contribute to the totality, and that there is a task of the political people to think in a frame that allow the people to develop the maximum capacities. I hope that is more or less summarized.
This is thank you, Ivan. It is a sort of ambitious book where it tries to both cover a glimpse into the future and then look critically at our systems of politics and figure out how we can move towards this world of one humanity. I thought we'll start the day by asking you a few questions on both sides of, like you said, light and day. Yes. Both sides of this, on the future and then on the politics. The first thing I wanted to say was my impression of when I read this, right? Like the first thing, I knew a little bit about your background, but as I read this, I'm like, this is somebody who is well-traveled, right? This is somebody who has been to a lot of places and appreciates the beauty and the character of these individual areas that you have to offer, right? More than anything away from the book, what I now have definitely is a bucket list of places to visit where I would like to definitely go and explore. But for the audience, I want to sort of go a little deeper on the ideas to understand the book a little better. And then I want to move on to asking some more questions about where this book came from, the ideas, etc. Let me start with something sort of very simple. Your book has a fictional character, Noor, right? Who's an entrepreneur essentially in artificial intelligence, and she's the one going on this mission to explore the world and find this new direction. Can you tell us a little more about Noor and what her motivations are, and what your inspiration for Noor was?
Well, first is a woman. So I wanted to put the main character in a woman. And this is a Syrian lady that the father is a very important doctor. And suddenly the war arrives in Syria and they propose the father to move to Germany, where many Syrians have been accepted. So the father goes there, and she is at the beginning a little bit uncomfortable because of the language, of the different values. So she concentrates very much in studying artificial intelligence, algorithms, mechanisms, etc. So she becomes a great scientist on many areas of artificial intelligence. And before the pandemic, it means that she goes to give lectures here and there, but always rushing, always taking one flight, another, and being short time, but being impressed by the beauty of different places. When the pandemic arrives, he thinks, well, I have to take advantage of the new moment to go to all these places, to speak to the people and to voice loudly how much the world can be transformed. And there is a project of artificial intelligence in each of the cities. Or the places, It goes to the island of Socotra that is in front of Yemen and in front of Oman. She goes to Novosibirsk in Russia. She goes to Samarkand. She comes to Mumbai. She goes to at least 18 different cities with 15 chapters that you take the taste of the different places. For example, although I know that our neighbor is not very appreciated here, but I was very impressed when I was invited to Dongguan, that is an area in China where the emperors of China, during 1,500 years, they recruited the artists to create caves in a mountain. And these caves were decorated in favor of Buddha, but was during 1,500 years. So I was very impressed when I was there that I adore art, I'm very interested in art, and I had no idea that existed. So I said to myself, we have to be much more open to what has been created by human beings in this planet, And then obviously when I was in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, and the tomb that was discovered by Champollion, and you see the beauty of that. I cannot imagine, sincerely, how we can leave this planet without having touched that, you know? So this is, in each chapter, a unique place, and it invites, especially the new generation, to get a new taste for planet Earth and to be interested in visiting that.
Thank you. That's exactly how I felt when I read this, right? That each place, the way your eye, and I assume this is that you visited all these places and these are your feelings, it just sort of made me want to get out and explore these sort of places that I didn't really even know. Like you said, Duangang, Wadi Rum, the islands of Kota, these are all places that are not in my list of places to go otherwise. The other thing that happens when you go to these places is that you identify a local problem or a local concern for each of these places. Can you tell us a little more about, was this part of your own travel that you came across that, okay, these, the deserts can offer tourism? Where did these ideas of those problems come from first? And then, of course, for each of them, you expand how artificial intelligence could transform that problem. So, like desalination of water in Egypt for new agriculture. I would love to know if you had real life inspirations for these, or was this sort of something you were reading online? How did this all come about?
Well, thank you very much for this question. On one side, I don't know why I was recruited very early in the University of Barcelona to be in the foundation that exists there between industries and researchers and people who can give a global idea of the things. So for 18 years I was involved in that. So I took the taste for how well connected can be science and businessmen, and that they can transform the businessmen, they can transform the ideas in realities, but sometimes the businessmen, without the researchers, they have not the idea to be transformed in a real product. So I was always very interested on that, and I have the life, the destiny has given me the gift to be in many places of the world, because as soon as I started my career in the diplomatic service, I was in charge of all the Latin American policy in Spain and the dependency of the minister. So I had to travel to all the 26 main countries in Latin America, and as Director General, I was immediately taken to interesting places of the country and interesting people who were managing the politics, the new projects, etc. So I had the grasp in Latin America. Then I was posted to the European Union, and I was given the responsibility on the Mediterranean. So I was traveling to Egypt, to Lebanon, to Turkey, to Morocco, all that. And then I was posted then in Mexico, and I was posted to United Nations as the ambassador, and then I was posted to Russia, but also touching all the Central Asian countries like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Armenia. And once I have been posted in India, that I'm so glad to be here, all the experience will be increased, because in addition to India, I have to cover Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Maldives, and Nepal. So it gives a great entry, and every time you cross the ideas with the realities. And I have always thought that when we have no solution for a problem, okay, we have no fault. But when we have the solution and we don't apply that, we have to be blamed not to be enough intelligent. So as I have seen many things that could be solved in many places with a new approach, I have tried to use the book. To show this. For example, this is going a little bit apart, but I'm very angry when I see that there are fires in small islands, because I think that in islands with the new technologies, it would be impossible to have fires. Why? Because the fires have the great advantage that there is always a little bit before smoke. So we can see immediately when it starts. So if we apply the same technologies that we have in the, let's say, in the continent, in the normal land for the islands, well, we have no advantage. But the advantage of the islands is that they are surrounded by water. So the new technologies, first of planes, then helicopters, but now with drones, show that it was very easy to have control of fires on the islands. So I'm very unhappy when I see that the governments allocate the normal means to the islands, and they don't transform the islands in very safe places against the fire. If you consider that a fire destroyed completely a forest for 10 years, and to be rebuilt completely takes 30 years, is a big blame. And the same thing happens with water. You know, at the end, rivers are a very small proportion of water. The real water is in the oceans. So, frankly speaking, 15 years ago, desalination was very expensive. But today, desalination, the cost has decreased very much, and it's going to decrease even further. So at a certain point, humanity had not the possibility of doing that. If we go to the year 1800, that we were in the eve of the Industrial Revolution, that was not possible. But today it is possible. How we can continue to have desertic areas next to the sea when everything could be transformed? And like that, many projects.
And you know, at this point, I'd like to ask you a little bit, before we get to the political One Humanity side, your passion for life on the islands, is that because you're from Mallorca yourself? Is that where this is coming from? How much time have you gotten to spend on the islands in part of your career?
Well, I have always been very attracted by islands, maybe because I adore swimming, and as I was born in Barcelona, that is next to the sea, I have always been very attracted by the sea. But I go very often to the Greek islands, I go to Sardinia in Italy, I go to islands, and I see, you know, I am angry when I see that there is a fire in an island because it could be avoided. It's very difficult to avoid a fire when it's in the middle of a big mountain. Is the Pyrenees, the Alps, or the Himalayas. If you have a fire there, it's very difficult because to go into the forest is complicated. So it's difficult to fight against that. But when things are easy, how we don't reorganize ourselves to be well prepared to confront that? And the book has a message on that.
All right. So let me take us to the chapter on Bombay, chapter 6 that you have, the challenge of urban planning and quality of life.
Yes.
First of all, just to give the audience a little bit of a flavor, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a few lines from the actual chapter so they have an idea. So in this chapter, Noor is traveled to Bombay where she is meeting her colleague Hari Ravi. And I'm just going to read out a little part. It's an English translation of this. From the first time she landed in New Delhi, when on her way to the hotel, the taxi dodged dozens of small and fragile tuk-tuks that crossed without any fear of being smashed by the cars that almost brushed against them. And when they cut him off, her trips to India had always left a mark on her. Everything was chaos that miraculously never exploded. Nowhere else could she see elephants, cars, and motorbikes loaded with 4 people coexisting on urban roads without it all ending in tragedy. Sheltered by its greatness and its legendary history, digesting modernity in its own style, that country was another world. This was your own visit to New Delhi? Is this your personal experience? When was the first time you entered or came to India for the first time?
Well, first time was 2011. Then I came quite often for very different purposes. In 2014, 15, 16, 17, I was in Jaipur, in Udaipur, obviously in Agra, in Mumbai, in Bangalore, in Delhi. And for me, the great subject here in India is urbanism, I say. You know, because you are a country of such big proportion, and the fact is that you are you are growing, you are increasing. So now you are 1.4 billion, but maybe in 2040, that's nothing. 2040 is just 16 years. You will be maybe 1.6. So 1.6, it means 200 million additional ones, and they need the pipes well built for the dirty waters and dustbin, and we need to organize well the hospitals and the houses. So for me, the key is urbanization, not building, but urbanization, because as a good architect said to me once, a very bad building in a very good urban plan, it resists time. A very good building in a very bad urban plan does not resist. Everything becomes a nightmare. So there's a message there trying to say, listen, now that you are increasing your per capita income, that we have new technologies, please go into thinking how urbanism will go to the country and also in some parts of the cities. And is this message around in India?
Yeah. In fact, I wanted to read a few more things just to sort of give a flavor of how you put this, right? So there's a point where Noor is reflecting, and she says, the tracks are unprotected. At any moment, there may be a fallen tree, a stationary group of animals, and the convoy unable to avoid it or to free it may derail. But when it happens, it will happen and life will go on. There is certainly another consideration here for the value of life, and it must be respected. For living only in the present also has its advantages. So, in this chapter on Bombay, it was very interesting for me, at least, to see how what is invisible to us. You made a comment in your opening remarks, which made me laugh, because you were saying in 1900, most of the world did not have paved roads, and in 2024 in Bangalore, I think we still don't. So you're absolutely right. In fact, at some point in the book, in this translation, Noor says that I don't know whether to congratulate you, pity you, or worry, for the challenge is so great that it makes one dizzy, right? And I feel that way often about the problems in India, right? Like that things need to change, but the scale of the change, given that same 1.4 billion people, is very, very hard. So my question to you, right, which is that this book is primarily about hope, and hope led by technology in some sense, right? That the future can be better because, say, desalination is now possible. So we can bring water from the oceans to the places that are starved of it. Energy is cheaper. Transport is more efficient, right? But in the face, we know that change is still slow, while the possibility is instant. Like the world got electricity, or steam engines in the 1870s, 1880s. But it took 1780s, sorry, it took a lot more time for it to like really expand, right? 40, 50 years. Electricity, same story. How do you balance that hope, right? New technology, new possibility. But how do we take it to all these people very faster and still have hope and optimism that such a large people and a large population can change? What's your message?
Well, it's a very complex question and has several points of answer. I will start with one about how fast you can progress in things. This is very relative. It's depending if you have the good orientation or not. I was having a lovely lunch yesterday when I arrived with one of the best thinkers here in the city. I was with the honorary council and with Reef. Yeah. And I said to him, I was very impressed with a conference I had in St. Petersburg once with the son of John Kenneth Galbraith. John Kenneth Galbraith was the Nobel Prize for Economics, an American in the middle of the 60s, more or less, and the son is now a very highly respected sociologist. And someone said to him, what is the key to development? And he said, the key to development is not education, is not financing. All those are very important, but are not the key. the key for development is how you organize the game. How you organize the game, it will take you to development or not. So in the case here, this is very true. In the case, first I want to make a reflection is how we live in a world where what we create of positive has not great impact, and what exists of negative has a great impact in the media. So we are a little bit bombarded by what is negative, and we don't take advantage of what is positive. And I will put you a very clear example. In 1970, the world population was 4 billion people. In 1920, the year of the pandemic, we were 7.8 billion people. So in only 50 years, we had nearly doubled the world population. The pandemic, in the worst of the cases, the people in medicine said, the worst of the cases, nothing was discovered, etc., would have killed 60 million people. These 60 million people, it's terrible, but you had the impression that the world was going to arrive to the end. But on the contrary, we had added nearly 4 billion people, and that had no merit. So we are a very complex world of what we evaluate as positive and negative. So I think that a lot has been accomplished. And in India, you have a great advantage. You have created a global framework for 1.4 billion people. This is enormous, you know. This is enormous, and you have created even a method of voting that is not corrupted and is not. People cannot say that it was fraudulent. Etc. For 1.4 billion people is enormous. So you have already the main thing. You have the frame. You have a kind of way of living. So the other things are easy to be accomplished, but it's very important, in my view, to work for a kind of organizing the common space of the society, the common space, in a better organized space, you know? So I said to someone, for example, the future of India, in my view, is the aerial connectivity. Because if you go through the normal path of development, obviously you are quite backwards. If you have to build thousands of kilometers of motorway, thousands of new railways, if you have to make this transformation, you can do it. But it's billions and billions and billions. Why you don't invest this 2% only of this all great amount, 2% or even 1% in a great research center with the best engineers thinking in the aerial mobility? And you become the first country in the world going into aerial mobility. And then you will have the ones very highly appreciated in Africa, because they will save also millions, billions and billions in motorways, in trains, because it will be the aerial mobility. Then someone said to me, yeah, but you know, in India, we don't give any advantage for aerial mobility. We don't accept nearly helicopters, drones. Okay, this is 2024. But someone has to make a sheet of what is the cost of investing in the normal development through land. How much is going to cost the thousands of kilometers of motorways, etc., and what would be the new transformation through aerial connectivity. So these are the elements. And the key thing, very easy, very close, is the thing of urbanism. I know that this is not easy, because even in a city where I come from, Barcelona, that was the most successful model of urbanization in the 19th century, because when there were no cars, there was a mayor that thought the next extension of the city and created 20 streets east to west and 15 north to south that had the distance of 4 lanes of cars and 2 equivalent ones for pedestrians. So the space was enormous in 1955 when there were only horses. So one could have said, how you are going to take so much land from me, the owner, just for empty space, just for pedestrian and horses. Well, the key thing is that then it came the development, people began to put the houses, and now it's a city visited by the world because how friendly it is. Okay, we developed that model, but then it arrived to a point, and after the Civil War, we had to develop the next expansion of the city towards the mountain. So the model was not copied, and the city grew towards the mountain in a very dispersed way, as many cities made. So what is the result? Everybody is enthusiastic in Barcelona, in the well-urban done area. Nobody is visiting the city in the upper part. So, you know, even when you have a very good model, you are so, let's say, stupid that you don't continue. So it's not an easy thing, but it should be a great priority in this country. Architects would create a great movement in favor that urbanization is the key for the new, let's say, image and lifestyle in India.
That's excellent. I think, and it's a perfect segue into the other half of this book, right, which is what your premise of your book is. We have all this possibility, but this possibility will not be realized unless a new political system comes together, a political system you call One Humanity. And in the last chapter of your book, you've laid down certain sort of ideas of this One Humanity. I'd love for you, if you want to share with the audience or if you want to keep it a suspense on what those points are. But you know, what I am curious to understand is actually the current world. From your experience, say this problem of why India does not even allow people to get private helicopters. So you can get a private jet, but helicopters, it's very hard to fly. You have to ask for permission each time. It doesn't work. And the regulations, looks like there's no incentive to change them, right? Nobody's asking, nobody's doing this. Similarly, Barcelona, that you said, is while the city initially in 1955, they had the vision to plan, but it's political incentives usually that fail to continue those planning, etc. So I wanted to ask you a question more around, from your experience, what prevents us from getting to this world of one humanity? What are the problems that you see today that stop us from getting there?
Well, you know, moving ahead is obviously difficult because you have to give sovereignty to a superior entity. But what is important is to put this target in the future, you know. That is the important thing. People say, oh, United Nations is not so effective, etc. I think it's a very important organization because it has created a kind of structure, institutional structure that at least it exists. All the ad hoc things that we have created can be interesting for a certain moment, but then they have not the capacity to act, to be a forum as the United Nations. Now, for example, G20 is very important, but you have a problem of who is member, who is not member, why these 20 members, and those who are not inside say why I was not inside. For example, I had a larger GDP, and then they say, but you have a very low population. But why population, GDP, etc.? But then what you create at the end? You create one meeting per year, which maybe it's a nice debate, but it's not the same as having the capacity of having a General Assembly, a Security Council that takes care or theoretically care of the problem in a very constant way. You say, well, but they don't reach a solution. Well, many times you don't reach a solution, but at least you have the the forum or the frame where a solution could be reached. So I would say that we live in a very early stage still, but we have a very good departing point. The departure point is that we have the world organized in this mosaic of 198 nations, you know? So I think that science is working a great job on that, a great job that is saying to the people how many possibilities you will have. And maybe at a certain point, there will be 3, 4, or 5 top leaders that will have a great momentum and will create the new step. It happened, for example, in Europe. In Europe, if you talk to the people in 1970, if Europe was going to have a single currency, nobody was going to say to you, yes. They say, well, never the Germans are going to abandon the Dutch mark, and never the French will abandon the French franc. Okay, it existed in the year 2000. It didn't exist in the year 1980, but existed in the year 2000. And why it existed in the year 2000? Because there had been an organization that was progressing little by little in that direction. So the thing, and this is a little bit the idea on the book, is that we have to create the mantra of what we want, you know, and we need to have the present generation who is mature in favor of that because they have had the experience of how important is peace. But we need the new generation to say, we want this to be delivered. And if we create this mantra, I think we can reach the point.
That's an excellent point. Right? We have to set out the vision even if we get there very slowly. But I think in previous installations of, even in your own book, when the UN Secretary General comes back for their speech, they talk about 1919 and 1945, which are sort of pivotal points in history when, you know, post-war, post-destruction, we sort of decided to come together to say, hey, how do we not let this happen again? The League of Nations in 1930, which became the United Nations and expanded, right? Would you say that it takes a crisis to bring us together?
Well, I would say that I hope not to need a crisis to progress, you know, because it is true that people, when live in peace, they forget the value of peace. There is a very nice passage in a novel of Marcel Proust, this French writer that created one of the iconic books of humanity that is called La Recherche du temps perdu. It's looking to recover the time. I don't know the exact translation in English, you know, but it's how we grasp the time. And it explains, like in 1914, the young French generation was rushing to be put their name in the list of people to be sent to the front, because the last war was in 1870, so it had been like 44 years without war, and the normal expectancy of life there in general was 50 years, so war had not been lived by the society, and they wanted to have that experience. Well, after 1 year and a half of being in the trench with the gas, with the, they were asking God to stop that nightmare, you know, and it is incredible. We repeated that with the Second World War in the most horrible way. And when you think, well, how it is possible that a nation like Germany, with the highest number of people who play classical music, that play Bach, Beethoven, that they have the most sophisticated philosophers in the modern philosophy in Europe, Schopenhauer, Hegel, etc., and that they have the great architects, they are motivated to be into confrontation and war, and to create a destruction of millions, and to create the worst Holocaust that can be imagined. So we have to be very careful of these things. That is why I think that the key is to create a mantra of the new world we want, and not to be only with a vision of words, but to take the support of science to say science is giving us the great opportunities. We don't want to miss this train.
So, would you say that sort of the last crisis that at least my generation saw was the pandemic? Would you say that we've learned any lesson or come together or created any such global change with the pandemic, or do you think we are starting to forget those lessons too?
You know, the exit of the pandemic has been my great deception, my greatest deception. I thought that at the end of the pandemic, there would be a movement in planet Earth in favor of investing in medical research. I thought that the key organization in the world was going to be the World Health Organization, that all the states were going to say now the priority is not the environment, that is extremely important, but the top priority is health, because the environment can be destroyed maybe in 40 years, it's horrible, but the whole humanity can be destroyed instantly if there is a virus that is fatal and we have not the means. So this pandemic has been like an alert, not as a terrible plague, has been an alert. And what I am very worried is that we have not taken seriously this alert at all. You know, as soon as the pandemic has finished, everybody wants to rush to recover the missed time, to travel more, to eat more, to have more contacts, no priority to health research at all, and they have even gone into wars. So I'm very worried that the destiny has sent to the global human race an alert, and we have not taken that seriously at all.
And do you see, do you see that structurally that we need, your point was that the UN is a great point of departure. We are already organized into these 198 nations, etc. But alongside this pandemic, I think people have also started losing faith in institutions. Maybe with social media, etc., there's been a lot more dissidence, even of vaccines, even of like things that we take great scientific truths. And even now this continues as people talk about, did the vaccines cause cardiovascular sort of events in young people where they would not have, etc. Do you see something has dramatically shifted in our sort of global media landscape or information landscape that makes us less willing to do these generational ambitious tasks and more willing to fight with each other over our little differences?
Well, this new attitude to be more demanding has a good and a bad side. It has a good side that is good to put pressure, to know the truth of things, to make the institutions to work better. So this side is quite positive, If not, people are too comfortable in their, let's say, consolidated zones of comfort, and things don't progress. So to be demanding, I think, has a good side. It has also a bad side, that we can very easily be misled, So when we are going to destroy something, we have to think always what's going to be the substitute of that, So I think that, for example, if we destroy United Nations, the only thing we will have will be the total power of the most powerful, And we'll have increased possibilities of confrontations. So I think it's a bad game. But on the other way, to say we have here a departure point, and we go further, and we go to be transformed into the organization of the whole humanity. I think it's a way of acting, But it's true. But for example, I'm not against the people who says about if this pandemic, etc., because we need to know at the end what was the origin of all that and what happened, etc. I think that it has to be more research on that. And at the same time, what happened, in my view, at a certain point, that we decided to make a kind of lockdown but this lockdown had no economic viability, because it could be a lockdown for 3 months or 5 months, but it could not be a lockdown for 5 years, you know? So we needed desperately to find, let's say, a new story to say to the people, okay, you were locked down, but now you can live, you know? So I think vaccines, they play a role in that.
Right. And I want to ask you one last question before I open up to the audience, which is that, do you see immediately post the pandemic, when supply chains failed, there was obviously the question on the origin of the pandemic. I think in many ways, the world has taken a bit more, or nations individually have started taking a bit more of a selfish stand, like, you know, nation first, individual first. We see this in their demand to de-link from manufacturing. We see this as people, you know, the Russia sort of invasion and assertion of power, etc., etc. Do you see us, you know, getting back to that kind of we are one, you know, more integrated society, all the nations together, world being very real very soon? Do you think it's going to take us another crisis to get there? Or do you think that that character, especially as a role as diplomat, is not really gone away? It's just the media that has changed the story. What's your opinion?
Well, I think that there is a role for the people who study the behaviors, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc., to really study very in depth the attitude of human beings after the pandemic. Because for an outsider, as me, from these scientific areas, I see that the general attitude has been a kind of nervosity. You know, so the people, by being locked down, they have to remain locked down. So everybody has invented a little bit that I will develop this new skill, I will study that. But in fact, people were nervous to be locked down, and they were nervous of how the world would be after that, etc. So once you have opened the doors, everybody has gone into the outer space with this nervosity. Individually, national, there is a common nervosity in the planet Earth at this moment, you know, because this lockdown has been the only lockdown in the history of humanity. It's not a simple thing.
Right. I'd like to open up to audience questions if there's any. Right.
You talked about the political changes because of the AI and technology in particular. So one of the most important innovations in technology side is the cryptocurrency, which may you know, at some point of time change the idea of a national currency to an international currency, which is uniformly available. I don't know how it will be available in terms of distribution of economic wealth, etc., etc. Because USA is very powerful today because it can print dollars as many as it likes, and everybody accepts that. So once you have a currency which is the world currency, if suppose it is cryptocurrency, then the whole economic perspective may change drastically. We don't know. Second thing is the idea of nationhood and a national identity on either national lines or ethnic lines or religious lines or whatever lines you have. How will that change because of technology or artificial intelligence?
Well, on the first issue, let's say that I'm not a great expert. I have been interested in this thing, but I'm not a great expert. I would say that since the very beginning of humanity, to have currency has been the key of power. So we have to think that cryptocurrencies are normally created by a small group of people. So, for example, the most famous Bitcoin, it is said that more or less 90% of the Bitcoin is in the hands of the 12 people who created that. And we don't know even the names. So I think the day that it was discovered that through this currency we are making the richest man in the planet, 12 people that had the idea to create the cryptocurrency, I don't know if people will like to play so much on that, you know? So we will see. But it has not been a currency created by the world. It has been a currency created by a group of people. And the same thing happens with all the new currency that they are launched to the market. It's Ethereum or any other. They are not created by humanity. They are created by a group of people that if the currency becomes successful, the wealth they have is incredible. So all these people that you read in the Forbes magazine, or who is the richest man in the man, etc., I think is not totally accurate, because at this moment the richest men in the world are the ones who have the bitcoins created in 2008, and at that point it was more or less 10 cents of a dollar, the bitcoin. 10 cents of a dollar. And now the richest moment has been $65,000. So imagine those who had the 90% of the bitcoins. So we will see how this evolves. Other people, they say that this is the transit for the digital currency of the great states. So there will be a digital dollar, a digital euro, and this will be a different way of managing. So this is one point. The second, repeat, because I understood very well, but I forgot. Oh yeah, this is very interesting. I will say to you, organizing the global frame does not destroy the local identities, because you see, for example, countries very well established, like France, people from Marseille, they feel very different from people from Lyon, or from people from Paris, you know? So one thing, you need to have a local identity. You like to be connected with your original village, with your original territory. So this is not going to be a septic world. The key thing is to have a global frame that you can ensure security, free movement of capital, free movement of creating projects. So when you have, for example, the states, you see how important it has been to create the framework, you know, because when you have a country like France in the year 1000, it was in the feudal period, there were many armies. So inside France, you have many counts and dukes, and they have the armies, and that was a very fragmented space. Now you have created only one country, so it means that you have a police, because you cannot avoid that there are certain people who have not the expected behavior, so you need the police, but there are no armies, and there is a great improvement for the space. And at the same time, the people who have a very good idea in Marseille, they can go to invest in Lille or can go to invest in Bordeaux. But at the same time, they feel very much from Marseille, even if they go to live to Bordeaux. So one thing are the identities, and the other thing is how important it is to create a space where the key element is police, not army, where you can create a business easily, move easily, then you can educate. So this is the key thing of the global framework.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. As much as you say, you know, like scientific development is the answer to a lot of these problems, it seems that each nation's, you know, divisions are deeply because also of the amount of, you know, resources and funding they can allocate to R&D. So you have, you know, Japan and the US, which are funneling billions of dollars and into, you know, quantum computing and AI, whereas other countries simply don't have that option. So whose responsibility do you think it is to, you know, make a more equitable world in terms of scientific technology? Is it the United Nations, or is it up to, you know, national governments to, you know, diversify? Thank you.
Well, I think that, you know, the great harmonizer of development at the end will be will be the innovation and the private sector through the new products. This will be the way the societies will be every time closer and closer. The states, as I said, are a little bit like the rivers, and they are the different stages, and people come from different stages of development. In Africa, a city like, for example, Dakar, that is the capital of Senegal, I was very impressed when I was there that the stone that says that the first stone of the city is 1905. So it started in 1905. When you go to Rome, you go incredible developments in the first century before Jesus Christ, in the second, in the third. So it has nothing to do, Rome with Dakar. So you cannot think that they are going to be at the same path, level, etc. The key thing is to have the capacity to organize the human beings into political structures that are more or less organized with an administration, justice, police, etc. The level of development will be different. But if you see in perspective, we are progressing every time more and more to common standards. I think that we are pushing very much, and sometimes our setbacks is because we cannot digest such fast transformation in everything. But when you see the perspective, we are very much progressing towards an harmony. If you see how was the life in Paris in 1910, on how was the life in a city in Latin America that was more or less developed, like Monterrey, you see a huge difference. Now you see that in Monterrey they have universities for science and technology, that they have also the underground. So seen from a global perspective, there is going to be an harmonization in the standards of living of the people. But time is time, and the path is slow.
Kind of adding to the same question, I think the key players in AI right now are the private companies like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and all those things, which all of them might not be their intentions, like ethics may not be their first priority, right? So we kind of discussed more hopeful takes of where AI can take humanity, but I think many of us are worried about in which direction AI is going and how AI is going to be used. Because in politics, even in many elections, AI can shape people's views immensely. So, like GDPR, like Europe has been a pioneer for regulating this AI and social media, but rest of the world, I think, has a lot to catch up. So what are your views, like what can we do as humanity for this?
Well, I think that it's very important that we have the mechanism of control, and that is why the role of the state is very important. So I'm not on the idea of dismantling states. I'm on the idea that what has been built by states has to go one step further and building a kind of global framework at the end. In the meanwhile that we are with the role of the states, I think that we have to be very involved in having the mechanism of control of the companies in order that we cannot put so many difficulties that we take all the oxygen out of the companies, but at the same time we don't give such a freedom that they become the new rulers. So this is the balance to be found. Is difficult. The Americans, to a certain extent, they have found it to a certain extent, in the sense that if you go you see the stock exchange market in United States, and you go 40 years back, you see that the 20 top companies, that were on the list, the 20. 40 years later, nearly no one of those is now on the top 20. So companies that did not exist are now on the top, and companies that were very strong have disappeared. So in a capitalist system, you think that if you are rich, every time you will be richer. So if you were powerful, then you would be extra powerful in 40 years. This has not happened, for example, in the case of the United States, that have always put a lot of effort in the regulators. So my point is, I think the companies, they begin to exist, then they need to have a lot of oxygen to exist, then they become very big, and when they become very big, the people began to be worried, as big as they are, and they began to be controlled. And they be controlled under rules. So I think that this is going to happen with the new artificial intelligence companies, tech companies, but it's something, a pattern that has always been existed. So my idea is that you need the mixture of both. You need the companies to have oxygen to exist and to grow, and you need the collectivity to be organized to say we are the boss of the game, but not the boss playing us directly, but having the last word on that.
I also thought I'll add to that. So part of what I do at my work, People Plus AI, is essentially try to shape the future to be a little more what we would like and not necessarily what companies would want us to do. I'd say with stuff like the internet already on social media or even search for that matter, right? Google is an intermediary whenever you want to ask even a simple question like, where should I go eat, right? It's an intermediary when you're thinking about where should I get healthcare, because you're going to search for dentists near you. You have a toothache, you're going to look for dentists near you. And the dentists on Google are the dentists near you. Otherwise, they're not dentists near you technically, or even though there might be a shop closer, if they're not listed online, they're not there. So you're absolutely right that there is a certain degree of control that private organizations have. But there are ways in which we can create frameworks or architectures for global information systems, artificial intelligence systems, which leave, like one is saying, oxygen for companies to innovate, but a structure to regulate, right? Our biggest example of this would be in India, something like UPI, right, which you all use. The underlying framework is made by NPCI, which is controlled in some sense by the central bank and is funded by a lot of the private banks coming together. So it's a public-private partnership that makes our payment system. But the apps on it that you use, you're probably using a Google Pay or a Phone Pay or a WhatsApp to pay, which are private apps, and they are completely free to build features and experiences within the boundaries that is set up by NPCI. Now, the problem today, of course, is that the input cost to artificial intelligence is very, very high to make your own model. But it is not so when it comes to using artificial intelligence. So it is much cheaper to build applications and build things around it. And we must not forget that that is where the value is. Ultimately, even if I make the greatest model which can answer all of the questions, but nobody cares, right? Nobody wants to use it. It's of no value. But where we apply AI in changing our lives and we use it daily, those are things of value, both economic value but also of meaning to us humans. So even if it seems like it may be out of reach, if we think more from the lens of what we are going to do with AI, and we start creating bottlenecks there, and creating structures and frameworks there on how to use, what is allowed, what is not allowed, we can still have a great degree of control even if it is not made by governments. Right, so that's my addition to that answer. But
and then, as final remark, different of that, but on the political game, to say, as Jared was saying, that we had to keep some mystery about the global world order. this book starts with the Secretary General proposing that we have to move, and then there are all the testimonies and all the debates, but in the final chapter is a real proposal. So it's not only wishful thinking, but it's a real proposal. But maybe you will find interesting or not, but once you read it, if you read it, you will see that this is the final specific proposal of moving, but this remains for those who want to read it. Thank you.
Dr. Yuan,
I think there's more questions for you.
yeah, so at the start of your talk, you put like individuals along with AI at the center stage of like the human's development. But we've been seeing historically like that individual freedom always comes in clash with like concept like morality, ethics, and it's kind of now become very like personal interpretation. There's no common thing like moral is like how I individually like take it. Now, how important is to insert this component into AI? Should there be a component like that of morality on ethics in AI development? Because I mean, like it's gonna take decisions for humans in the future. So, do we require something like that?
Well, this will be answered by him that is more expert than me, but my initial answer is that there is a great debate on that. There is a debate to insist to the investors in artificial intelligence to demand always or request that there is no, for example, language in favor of racism or xenophobia or negative attitudes. It's a kind of moral code, but I think that at this early stage is a high sensibility on that, a high sensibility that as artificial intelligence will build the language in function of the inputs they have, it's important to control which are the inputs we are giving.
So I have I studied engineering, of course, and I also went to Ashoka University for what is essentially a crash course in the humanities. But it was a fun year, get to meet a lot of people. I was always curious about more sort of philosophy, sociology, right? Like studying the human condition. But the IITs are not a very good place to learn any of that, right? Like they just want you to get marks, get a job, get out. So I scratched that itch there. And therefore I speak from two lenses, right? As an engineer, I can tell you that if you give me a set of morality, I will find a way to give you an approximation to that morality. I'll get you 91st, 80% there, then 90% there, then 95% there, and hopefully one day 99% or there. As my humanities lens will tell you, I'll tell you what I will laugh at is the fact that you believe you can define a universal morality, right? Like every culture, every group, every subgroup has its own idea of what is moral and what is ethical, right? I take the simplest example is the flavors of vegetarianism in India, right? There are vegetarians who say that eggs are sterile, hence okay to eat. A lot of the vegetarians in India are not vegan, mostly because we are okay with dairy, right? And then you have Jains who won't eat potatoes and onions, right? Because of a belief that anything that comes from under the ground has living microorganisms that you must not eat. So in our own country, to come to the morality of a very narrow topic of what animal products can you consume, right? Like the idea of getting it right or uniform is very hard. So then the question comes, okay, as an engineer, I'll tell you, I will give you a choice of moralities, right? I'll engineer each of them. Then politics again, which morality reigns supreme? Which morality is installed by default and which morality do you have to accept terms and conditions and download and add, right? Those are again political questions. So, so yeah, I mean, should we do it? Of course we should do it, right? But the answer is, which one? Yeah, I'm sorry, we have to call it a thing, I guess. We have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes, says the organization. Oh, sorry, okay.
Yeah, very good evening, sir, and Tanuj, thank you so much for this talk and very enlightening. Hi. Yeah, hi. Voice, okay, hi, and welcome to the city once again. So the question is, sir, that very recently Meta admitted that they were under pressure to curtail some content of COVID-19 from the US administration. This was very recently in the newspapers also. So when you have some social media platform like this, which is being pressurized by the government to censor or influence the content, which is still not AI driven, how do you see AI shaping these kind of instances, or the private company is still a stakeholder in the government or vice versa? So how does that influence, and what do we believe? That's the question.
Well, you know that we have to establish the priority, the vision of the government, not the vision of the company, you know. Obviously, for that we need democratic governments, because if not, the situation is very different. But in the moment that we have democratic governments, the companies cannot dictate the law to the governments. It is the governments who dictate the law to the companies.
All right. All right. I think we Ambassador Juan has to leave by 8 sharp. So I thought maybe we'll ask you once to sort of leave. I know that this book was written, you didn't touch upon this earlier, but this book was written based on this sort of comment by your daughter, and therefore this is a book even as you dedicate to your daughters and to the younger generation, right? So I just wanted to close with some final words from you on sort of a message to those who are actually going to be sort of, you know, in this future. Do you have any message to leave the younger generation with?
Well, I'm very happy that the younger generation puts questions, no? Because they are the ones who can remodelate this book. You know, this book tried to be only like a initial incentive for them to think on 2 areas: how much things are going to change and how they need to keep a kind of social engagement for moving the world towards a certain direction, you know? So this is the key thing. And I think that as we live in a world that has conflicts, has difficulties, but nothing compared with the World War, it is in the hands of the new generation to create this new culture in favor of let's say, the total priority of innovation and peace and global understanding. You have to say, listen, we want a global framework that I can work easily with other peoples in the world to communicate, to move, and we think that the positive power of humanity is enormous. And we cannot forget how much conflicts or bad dynamics can take us backwards. I always say that, for example, I was speaking with the consul, honorary consul of Spain today at tea time. We were saying, you know, with the invasion of Rome by the barbars that were coming from North Germany, with the total destruction of Rome, although this is a very different area of India, but, you know, we went backwards 700 years. You know, the kind of development that was in Europe in the year 475 was not reached again until the year 1100. So for 700 years, the people had lost all the capacity of making greater sculptures, new designs, new important houses, good way of living, medicine, research. So we can go backwards very quickly. So we have to avoid that someone has the inspiration of destroying us, because normally the people who have the vision of a big confrontation, etc., they get certain support very easily. So the idea is to create a complex movement in favor of the new stage of the era of the intelligence. And that is why I said that it's not clear that this is going to arrive, that we are going to enjoy that. It depends on us to step in.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank Juna Antonio March and Tanuj Bhojwani for bringing today's session to VIC. Thank you to the audience for spending your evening with us. If you'd like to know more about future BIC events, there's a QR code to our WhatsApp community that you can scan outside. Thank you. Have a good night.